And without further ado, one of my life best friends, not just one of my tennis best friends, James Blake. James, where are you right now?
I'm at home. I'm heading to Miami. So by the time people listen to this, I will be in Miami in full event mode for the Miami Open.
I was gonna say, like, you have this job. Is it a real job? Because it starts soon, and you're still at home, just in your socks, just hanging.
It has definitely already felt like a real job with a lot that's been going on this week, especially even actually since the Simona Halep announcement that we've
Oh
given
yeah.
her a wild card. But it's full throttle now, and I'm getting on a red eye tonight, and I will be there first thing in the morning. I go straight to the office, so I'm excited, and it is actually so to say, whether or not it's a real job. My wife actually says this is the only time she ever feels like I've had a real job in my whole life is these next 3 weeks at the Miami Open.
That's probably right. I wanna follow that line of thought and get kind of into the weeds about your pretend job in Miami. But since you mentioned Simona Halep, obviously that was a huge story last week. Going from, I mean, frankly, it seemed like, oh gosh, is she going to be? Is it done? Is it over? Is she ever going to play again? To, you know what? Come on down. Let's play in Miami now with that wild card. Who makes that final decision on giving her that wild card? Is that you, or are you a voice in the room?
Yeah, that one is more on me. So there are times when it's if we're getting into the weeds, there are times when it's a group decision because Miami Open is owned by IMG Endeavor, so they have a lot of the say. But when it comes to some of the tennis decisions, they're going to trust me. And when this happened, we had already gone through a lot of our wildcard discussions, and some years the wildcard discussions are knockdown dragouts between one agent really lobbying for their client, another agent lobbying for theirs, another with me saying no, we need a young American in there, and going back and forth. This year it wasn't that crazy, but we did have, luckily we actually had one. We were gonna save one women's wildcard because you know what, you never know what's gonna happen, and we were so fortunate that when that happened that we left one this time. And as soon as that happened, as soon as I saw it, I was actually the first one that saw it on social media and just emailed the team and said, guys, I haven't gotten the formal request yet, but the fact that she's cleared and ready to play, I have a feeling within the next couple of hours, we need to be ready for whether she's going to ask. And we said, okay, let's, everyone kind of break on your own and come back and let's talk about what we think. So we, at that point, we read the reports on it, and we all kind of came to the same conclusion that we would love to welcome her back. And she's served her punishment. She's done everything she could. She's been cleared, so no reason. And we also, I mean, luckily enough, I work in my other pretend job. I'm a commentator, and work with Darren Cahill, who used to coach her and is still close with her. And I said, hey, has she really been practicing? Because you don't want to put someone out there that hasn't been practicing, hasn't been playing, and it's actually gonna be detrimental to them. We don't want them going out and getting killed. And so she's been practicing. Darren said, she's been ready. It's gone in waves at times, but she's been practicing and ready to go. So we thought it was great to welcome back a great player.
And believe it or not, contrary to a lot of fandom belief, you do have to make money. So when someone is a two-time Grand Slam champion and is one of the lead stories in all tennis news, it is a good idea to have her in the tournament when that interest is peaked. All those other reasons were great too, James, but also she's bringing in revenue. It makes it a complete no-brainer. So this tournament director job, like, how does it happen? Like, did you just apply on LinkedIn, or how does that work?
No, luckily I haven't spent much time on Craigslist or LinkedIn. They contacted me. Now it's 7 years ago. 2000,
9?
2018. It was my first year, so they contacted me in 2017. So about whether or
That's
not I'd be
that's
interested in
not.
doing it.
Hey, producer Mike, that's not 9 years ago. That's only 7 years ago. I didn't go to
I said
Harvard, but he
seven.
got. Oh, I thought you said 9. I was gonna say you're dumb.
I said
Yeah.
seven
I,
7 years ago.
can we, if he didn't say 9, can we dub over and make it sound like he said 9?
Let's go back to
Okay.
the tape and see if I said
Okay. Sorry.
seven.
Sorry to interrupt. You have a job. Go ahead. How'd you get it?
But they contacted me, and at first I wasn't sure. I didn't know if it was something I wanted to do, and then I started thinking about it and realizing It's a way to use the knowledge I learned on tour. And obviously, our bodies don't produce the same way they used to on the court. So, what can I do that still has an impact on the game without being able to be physically able to compete? So, it was something that it became more and more of a trend, and now it's still very popular with a lot of former players as tournament directors. And the more that I've learned about the role, the more that I understand why it makes sense to have a former player doing it.
What is something that like I wouldn't know? I'm a former player, but I haven't done that job. Like, what's the number one thing that you spend time on that would be surprising to former players or fans in your new role, or not in your new role, in your role?
Well, I would say how far in advance a lot of this stuff gets planned. For example, when I was a player, when we were players, you expect the schedule to be out at a certain time. Like, come on, how come you guys can't get the schedule out? Having no idea that the master schedule is done months in advance. So this is when we've got a combined event. So you have to deal with ATP and WTA, and we have to come to an agreement on which matches are on which courts. So you want to have equal representation on center court, then on Butch Buckles court, on grandstand court. You want to have it all the way down the line. So to make that work for both organizations, you have to come to an agreement way, way in advance. So we've got email, probably 50 to 60 emails going back and forth with little tweaks of which one, is there a doubles match on this court? Is there going to be a singles match here? What's the timing for each one of these? So going through all that takes a little bit more work. And then the actual scheduling process on site is in when you got a combined event like this, you got ATP in the room, WTA in the room, ATP media in the room, and WTA media in the room. And you got to try to make everyone happy. And then there's ticket sales, which also has to have a little bit of a say. But trying to put that together and being a player and not knowing all that, thinking, hey, we can't just get the schedule out. It's something that I learned, and it's definitely very time consuming when it comes to kind of piecing that all together.
Let's talk about your time split, like scheduling, sponsor. What amount is just putting out fires that are kind of unpredictable? How much of it is just dressing your beautiful family up like you're going to Easter brunch and marching everyone around looking like America's perfect family? Like, what's your time split when you're actually on site?
Well, you've narrowed down some of the major time commitments. Is sponsors. You got to make sure to keep them happy. So that's suite visits. That's talking to them. That's keeping doing little tours. Sometimes they want to see what they're getting for their money, and so that's a lot of times more later in the event. Second week, a lot of the bigger sponsors are there wanting to see some of the later rounds. But the scheduling is every day. There's a meeting that could be an hour to an hour and a half every day. And then usually there's planning because I have to go through what I think my schedule should be before that. So that's 2 hours a day probably, just going over the schedule, which is way more than I ever would have thought as a player. And then putting out fires is a ton of time. That's someone's got an issue with the practice, and then a lot of that is just delegating. That's getting it to the right people. There's a problem out on the practice courts with there's a crack in the court because of the weather. Okay, I need to get operations out there. But now there's a problem because I didn't get the practice court I wanted. Okay, now we need to get to Dev at the practice court desk, and you got to figure out. A lot of it is just delegating. Okay, little things that you never think are a problem for me become huge problems sometimes. The first year we were at Hard Rock, I couldn't believe one of the biggest problems I dealt with, one of the biggest fires I put out was coffee. I know you're a coffee drinker. I'm not a coffee
Yeah,
drinker. I did not realize how many people would complain because we had changed coffee vendors, and apparently this one was not good. And every single European player and coach had seemingly came up to me to say, "We can't drink this. It's disgusting. I don't. We can't have this." So
I get it.
we had to go. So we brought in Blue Bottle Coffee, which is a great, apparently really really good, and we gave them free coffee for the rest of the event because everyone was so upset about how bad the coffee was, and that's something that I had no idea was a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. I mean, James, that's the way 90% of Earth starts their day. Like I mean, you're the weird one, James.
Yeah, you've been telling me that for years. I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll start listening to you.
I'm glad I was proven right. Okay, so something I want to touch on because we kind of like to create a framework. It's easy to say we're in a scheduling meeting. who is in that meeting and what are kind of the general topics that you have to get through each day? Like who I'm assuming there's a representative from both tours, someone else from the tournament. I'm sure there's someone, who's in that meeting and kind of what are the hurdles that you kind of traditionally have to get over day to day?
Yeah, so it's myself, my other tournament director, Kathy Stock, and then it's the ATP, usually whatever the tour supervisor is for that week, and the ATP media, the WTA supervisor, and the WTA media, and usually it's a battle between what's best for the tournament and what's best for. A lot of times, it's the media that has a big influence. For example, Ei Nishikori, is a huge star in Japan. Almost always he's going to be first up because he doesn't mind it, first of all, but also because that's when it's better for playing in Japanese media. That's better timing for them. And then we don't want to put some of the European stars later in the evening because that's going to be middle of the night where a lot of their fans will be watching. So the media is asking for, hey, can we have Andy Murray in the middle of the day instead of the night match? Well, for the tournament, maybe he's the biggest draw that day, and we want him at night. So now we got a battle, and it's okay. What's going to be more important? And a lot of that just comes down to compromising. It's okay. You know what? This time we'll do that. We'll put Andy Murray during the day. It's not the best for the tournament, but next time now know that if we do it this time, if he wins, next time we got to put him as the night match. Okay, we can work with that, and we'll shift around, and we'll do this, and so a lot of it is just kind of compromising. Every once in a while, there's a trade between the ATP and WTA. Well, look, we've got three massive matches that we have to put out here, and we don't have that space on grandstand. We'd have to relegate that to court one. Well, can we switch? And then the next day we'll switch it again to another ATP match. Okay, well, so a lot of it is just compromising, and I think it helps. The reason I think having a former player there, like myself, to help is that I can understand when players will have an issue with that. And I can say, hey, no, there's no way we can do that. We can't put so and so out on court one because they really take that seriously and they want to be on stadium. And then one thing that I've actually done a few times that they've been a little surprised by is, well, you know what? Let's go ask the player. Let's ask if they're okay with it because they're usually making these decisions almost not even thinking about the players opinions. This is what we think is best for the player. Well, okay, that's what you think, but let's go to the source. I mean, last year we had a huge discussion. We were probably in there for an hour battling over this Alcaraz Fritz match, which was the best match, one of the best matches of the tournament, and one of the biggest draws. Number one American, former, defending champion, superstar, Grand Slam champion. Well, we want to play it at night, but you know what? It's better for them because of the way the tournament is. When they have to come back for their next match, it's better if they play during the day. And after an hour and a half, we've been battling, and where are we going to put him? What's fair? What's the best? I said, can I just call them? Let's just call Carlos's agent, and I'm going to call Mike Russell and say, hey guys, are you cool with playing at night? Because that's better for us and better for everyone. Is that a big deal? If it is a big deal, we'll go right back into the room and we'll talk about it again. But we called them. They said, okay, all right, meeting over. They're good with it. I think that's something that a lot of other non-players wouldn't have the ability to do, to go to the players and say, hey, let's think about what they care about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. They're like the novel innovation you're bringing is just asking the players.
It is. I mean, we're letting people in on the secret, and maybe I'm not as smart as people seem to think I am. I just come
Oh,
up
for sure, you're not as smart as people think you are. Like just so we're very clear on this. So when you're saying that, basically, like, I'll promise you, hey, basically, I'll get you the next time. We're stuck into this TV schedule. Certain markets are requesting certain players, and players are mostly rational. I was largely irrational, but like they kind of get it, I think, most times. But I'm also sure that it's not a guarantee if you say the next time we'll get you, because then the next time you might be stuck again. Give me like an anonymous story of someone just losing it on you, like your first experience or your biggest experience as tournament director, where you're like, oh, I'm on the other side of the players now. I am outside looking in.
Yeah, so I'll give you two. So I'll be equal opportunity. Yeah, one on the men's side and one on the women's side. On the men's side, we'll keep it
And
anonymous.
if you want to name names, go ahead. If you want to name names, go ahead, but you don't have to. I'd like you to.
we'll keep it anonymous. On the men's side, it was, well, I'll name one name. So it was my first year, so 2018. We were still at Crandon Park, and Nick Kyrgios, huge story, as he still is, always big draw. And we had him on Stadium, and another player that was far more accomplished, not a Grand Slam champion, but a Masters 1000 champion, a very, very top player. And he was on Grandstand, and he was pretty unhappy about that. And so he had his agent, someone from his team, come and say, "Hey, so and so is very upset and really wants to talk to you." So I have to go to the locker room, and he's like, "What is this? BS. He hasn't accomplished this. Look at my resume. Look at his resume." And I was like, "Look, we put him out on one of the outer courts for doubles, and we actually had a security risk because we had so many people rushing to get there. Like, so our only option, we got to put him on Stadium. It's just such a big story. We have to do it. I'm really, really sorry." He was pissed, but he got over it, which was great. On the women's side, I think there's a great champion that is probably still upset at me because we had a situation where it was one year. It was actually our first year at Hard Rock, and we had so many great women players. And one section, one half, was just stacked with Serena, Osaka, just tons and tons of players. And we had the situation where the number of, like I said, that schedule that's way in advance, we had so many sort of center court, grandstand court matches for the women's side, and one of them was going to have to be on an actual like outer court, like a court six kind of a thing. And it was between two players that their resumes were almost exactly the same, and they're both Hall of Famers, probably Hall of Famers. So you would know better than me, but both of them, two Grand Slam titles, um, number one in the world. I mean, unbelievable. Both great players, both deserving of a center court. But we had to pick one. One was going to go, and one, no matter who I picked, it was going to be the wrong one. But one of them had a little bit more of a following. She was from a Spanish-speaking country that had more of the Latin. We have a lot of Latin American fans, and so we figured she was going to be a little bit more popular. So the other one that got put on an outer court, I got told later that day that she's looking for me. And
Ooh, she's looking for you.
she's looking for me.
Ooh,
And
someone sent out someone. This is like The Wire. Someone set out the word.
yeah, so she was not happy at all. And I think to this day she's still like bitter towards me because I put her on an outer court. But I mean, if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have done it exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to do it all again, you would still put Muguruza on Stadium Court, and then, I'm just glad Zverev got over it. That's fantastic that happened for you. That's great. Like I love that for you. That's great. You don't have to confirm or deny
You're
anything,
naming
but
names, and
I'm glad. That's just my guess. I don't know this for sure. I honestly don't know these stories, but yeah. So glad that you and Zverev are still good. Muguruza's out of the, she's largely out of the picture now, so you don't have to worry about that again. That's fantastic.
I don't have to worry about that at all anymore.
Yeah, good. So something that like I put out, I got a couple of texts last week during practice week of Indian Wells. And obviously the balls normally get a little crazy there, a little fluffed up, but it seemed extreme this year, right? So it seemed like they just were real bad. And so I was kind of making jokes about it. I would put the ball next to like a troll doll in a side-by-side, or, I posted one because they don't use Wilson at the Master Series event. So I put one of like Tom Hanks, like screaming Wilson, just messing around with it. And I got more responses where it was like, "Oh yeah, that sucks. Where's Tommy Haas?" I'm like, "What do you expect Tommy Haas to do?" It's a tournament director in Indian Wells to do the day before the event, order 26,000 cases from Taiwan. Like, how much say do you guys have in the ball? But it's a tour deal, right? Like it's a pre-negotiated deal for the year, or do you actually have some say, or is it an individual tournament buy for the ball sponsor?
It's an individual tournament, so actually I had some say. That was our sponsor was the deal was up. I believe it was my second year, so 2019, and they sent me cases of balls to test for different companies, and it ended up being, look, I had to say that's where I'm just a voice in the room. I definitely don't have the final say on that because there's a lot of dollars being thrown around there, and it's not my checkbook. It's IMG Endeavors. But they wanted me to test to make sure everything was okay with the balls, and then it came down to two, and they chose Dunlop, which has been our sponsor now for the last few years, 5 years, I believe. And we feel really happy with that decision. But that is something that, yeah, if like the day before something goes wrong, there's no changing it at that
There's no
point.
chance.
But it's something that is a decision, whether it's a year in advance or however many years in advance your deal goes. That's when you have the opportunity to change. And so for Indian Wells, I don't know how long their deal is. I don't know when they're able to get out of that if they want to look to other balls. But for us, we've been very happy with Dunlop. We've been very happy with the way it's played, and we did testing. We made sure, okay, this is, I'm going to hit with it. Granted, I don't hit like the tour players anymore, but I can still hit a little bit and see, okay, this one's going to last. This one feels like I'd be comfortable playing with it. But you know, Indian Wells in Miami, the difference a lot of times is those court surfaces. I know you've talked about that, how gritty it
Yeah.
is in Indian Wells. So I think that's going to tear up nearly any ball. And so I think, unfortunately, that may be misplaced with the anger because it might be more having to do
Yeah.
with the.
Yeah. And also like I'm gonna yeah, I'm happy to say when I'm wrong, but then you're watching Indian Wells and the court is faster than it's been before. Like the ball actually is traveling through the air decently. Someone, I guess someone else was like, well, Murray said it's traveling. Like, well, what do you say to that? I'm like, well, then trust Murray. He's the one playing.
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
mean, like it's pretty straightforward. Now, as it like the ball thing, it seems like it's kind of a macro issue. And this is kind of the problem in a lot of different areas of tennis is each tournament has to decide in a silo. So therefore, they make a decision. You know, people are going to come from Indian Wells, where it's a completely different surface. You know, they're both hard, but they play completely differently. Pen ball, switch, adjust to Dunlop. How do we fix these macro issues and establish lines of communication? Is that the ATP's job to kind of connect the dots? Like, shit, you said you don't know when Indian Wells's contract is up. Is there room for like a macro conversation so that the players aren't rightfully complaining throughout the year about having to switch kind of every week? Because that does matter.
Absolutely. And I think we need to establish you as the commissioner of tennis and make these kind of
Yeah, right.
unilateral decisions, because I think I completely agree that there should be a continuous path. There should be, whether there's one ball or the surfaces can't be that different. I mean, last year coming from Indian Wells to Miami, Indian Wells was much slower last year. And we heard those complaints. We heard those kind of questions from like Medvedev, and when we got there, we made sure our courts were a little bit quicker. That's something we can change every year because we resurface every year. So we can make it a little bit quicker. And we've heard the players saying they wanted it a little bit quicker. But I do think there should be a macro issue of, let's have this be similar when they're right next to each other, because people, a lot of non-huge tennis fans, non-diehards, don't realize that it's just hard courts from Indian Wells to Miami, but they are played totally different when it's a slow, gritty court to a little bit faster court to a different kind of ball, to the fact that you've got crazy humidity in Miami and no humidity in Indian Wells, and there's a 3 hour time difference. So, I mean, you got so much going on. Let's figure out a way to make it much more continuous. And I think it's tough because, like you said, every tournament operates in a silo. And as you said way in the beginning, a lot of it has to do with the fact that tournaments want to make money. So they're figuring out what deal works best for them and not figuring out what works best for the tour together. So we need one person that's going to say, hey, this is what's best for the entire tour, and we need to then fit into that structure and find a way to make money that way. And what we'll do is we'll make the tours stronger in general, and that rising tide will raise every ship. So my
Yeah.
nomination is Andy Roddick
Yeah.
for
Right.
president of ATP WTA combination.
Yeah, that would go over really well up until I said something wrong in the first 12 seconds that I was in play. And I will say too, like I'm pro player on these issues. Like we've all had an elbow that doesn't feel good when you feel like you're fighting that on top of everything else, on top of travel. And I know a lot of people would dismiss it. You know, they'll look at a paycheck and say, well, you know, stop complaining. It's like, well, no, you have things at your job, even if you make a good salary, that you would change if you could. And if you expressed your opinion, and that led to potentially a pressure campaign that eventually led to change, you would use that tool also. It doesn't matter if you're in an accounting firm or you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or, in food service, you would still, if you could leverage your voice for a result, you would. Conversely, because, you kind of want to play it out both ways. The players always are pretty outspoken about, we generally want more prize money. Right? We want more prize money. We're into it. We don't like cuts. We want to keep growing. And then also complain about the balls. There is a trade-off there, right? Like you have to sign a contract to affect payment. And so I would just like the rational part of the conversation is, listen, we would vote for the best contracts in place for the entire tour. We would just like a little bit more communication between all of the separate silos of tournaments throughout the year. So there certainly is some nuance to that conversation. Quick transition. How canceled would we be if we would have pulled our Davis Cup pranks now instead of back in like 2007 and 2008?
Oh man, I'm actually trying to think of a PG-13 one that we could tell so that
No.
there were some good ones. I mean, we started. How about how much it advanced with the speeches? It
The
went.
speeches are great. That's my next question. Is your favorite speech ever?
Oh yeah, so those were great. But I mean, one of the other things I would say the PG-13 one was how about the fact that it's impossible to embarrass Sam Querrey? You remember that one? We tried to have
No,
him
tell me.
karaoke. We tried to have him karaoke
Oh, yes,
when
that's right.
we
In Palm
came back from the
Springs
team
in the
dinner
lobby. That was unbelievable. Tell that
in the
story.
lobby. So we had him karaokeing with all the dignitaries coming in, walking in at the time. "Hit Me Baby One More Time" by Britney Spears.
So this is post, like we go. So let me set the stage for context real quick. Like, so Davis Cup week, you always had this night that like I personally hated. Most of us didn't like, but it was like we tried to have as much fun as possible inside of this very formal. Everyone, no one's drinking on our team. You're shaking hands with a million different people who, are just there because they're board members of like this thing that they're not interested in improving. So you already have this kind of animosity. And so we said, okay, we would always kind of initiate, like rag on the practice players. And so we're like, okay, we're going to set up a karaoke machine in the lobby of the hotel as everyone's walking back, like walking, you drive home and Sam's going to be the entertainment. And so what did he sing?
Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears. And so, and not only did he sing it, just like you would expect someone to be embarrassed, like he was into it,
Fully.
dancing, going crazy, and then finishes,
phenomenal.
And we're like, oh man, like that, he's not even embarrassed, and he actually asked to do one more. He's like, I can do better. I'm gonna give me another song. You're killing this joke. I mean, we want to embarrass you, and there's no way to embarrass you. You're happy doing this. It's not. It didn't hit its mark at all with that one, but. I mean, we did have to get. I don't know if you remember, we had to get in suit and tie, for all those things. Andy, have you learned to tie that tie yet, or no?
No, and I was at a. No, you'll like this. I was out. No, still don't know how to tie a tie. I had to tie one. I was on a golf trip and I had to tie one because I'd always the place that I'll go play golf is you have to wear a tie at dinner, and no one for years has known that like I just wear a clip on.
Yeah.
Like I just wear a clip on. And then someone came up, someone sold me out. And so the guy who leads the food service there walks up in a room full of people in ties and like classy place, just tears my tie off in the middle of it. And I'm just holding a clip on in my hand. And so now Jay Billis actually sold me out on that one, prick. And then so the next time I tied it, and I swear, James, I don't know if you can see it, I tied it and went to dinner, and my tie was this long. It was as long as this pen. It was an absolute dumpster fire.
I still think of you every time in that. It's Tommy Boy, the scene where like Chris Farley has the clip on and take it off. He's like, oh, it's a clip on. Oh, you think? Really? That's every time I see that, I think of you. Like, yeah, that's Andy.
Yeah, that happened. And we used to like make the practice partners give speeches.
Oh yeah.
And so I remember
Did you give one?
Ryan, do what?
Did you ever have to give one?
No, because like I was a practice partner once, and that was the tie where Pete Andre, Johnny Mack, like basically the entire team, no one stayed together. No one stayed at the same hotel. Like Pete and Andre barely were in the same room the entire week. So like there was none of that kind of thing. So I got in, and then by the time the next tie came around, I was on the team. So I kind of didn't, I didn't have to do it, which was great. But we would have, I got challenged one time. We would always done things like someone's like, okay, I was pretty good at like, if you gave me a word, I could fit it into a press conference. And the goal would be to fit it in as seamlessly so that no one would notice except for your teammates. And I pulled off kumquat
Kumquat was a great
in
one.
in Moscow seamlessly. And it was, I did like the hard accent on quat. So it was like, they're going to come. What's next? I don't know. Like, and so there were all these like little miniature games. Like, what did Sweeting had to say? Reach around in Moscow
Yeah,
at a very formal
Dingleberries, I
dinner.
think.
Dingleberry.
So do you remember?
Yeah.
It started. It used to just be you give a speech. So like I just had to give a speech. That was the like almost initiation. Was they don't tell you until it's like, hey, get up there and give a speech. So you're on your toes and you're already nervous. Then we started adding in because they started figuring out they had all heard through the grapevine. All right, now we're gonna have to do a speech. So we started adding in words. And the first one I remember that we had to do was Tim Smechek.
Oh, so good.
And we got him. We had to
So
have him.
good.
We had to have him say poop.
He had said say
That
poop.
was it, poop. And I really thought that was an easy one. It's like I thought he'd go through and be like, all right, this has been such a tough training week. The guys are working
I'm
so
pooped.
hard. I've been pooped. It's been
Yeah.
tough. But instead, this was
This was
unbelievable.
so
He
good.
walked up to the microphone.
Room
and
full
just,
of people, 100, 200 people in suits.
everyone in suit and tie, very formal, gets to the mic and just goes, poop. My name is Tim Smechek. And no context, no nothing, just starts the speech with poop. Fantastic. So of course we're dying laughing, and it just escalated from there. So that was every time we had to think of new words for people to say.
You know what else is hard is transitioning off of a story about someone just saying poop. That's a hard thing to get back. That's a hard thing to get back to James's thoughts about the changes in tennis and how does it change since you retired, James?
And Andy, this is why you're a pro. You're now a veteran of these podcasts, and you got these segues. You got it down.
I just ignore norms, and that's fine. Like, basically, we're going to go from a story where someone says poop, and I'm going to have you tell me the differences between, at least from where you sit, between tennis now and when you retired. What are the biggest differences?
Oh man, geez. Now, we really are shifting.
He's blushing.
Biggest differences now. It just keeps getting better. I love that about our sport. The athleticism. I mean, watching Novak play and his improvement to like those open stance, like sliding backhands, what Alcaraz can do with that, and the fact that more players are incorporating that, seeing Alcaraz and Sinner both able to do that, and just the speed that Alcaraz has, and his, showing the variety, the fact that he's now adapted at such a young age to be able to see that okay, the game has started shifting back. Medvedev's, Rafa's, Zverev's, all pulling way back, and then okay, so what's the way to combat that? Have a drop shot, be able to attack and come forward. That's what Alcaraz is able to do. That's what Sinner, I feel like, has added a little bit more to his game in the last year and a half. So seeing the way that the players adapt and what they're kind of focusing on is really amazing. And I mean, like I said, the game gets better. I'm never going to be one of. I am a commentator. But I'm never going to be one of those commentators that is going to say, "Oh, back in my day, we would have beaten
Oh,
you."
God, thank goodness.
No, 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 no. The guys are better. There's a reason I'm in the booth wearing a suit and not out there is because I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and that needs to be said like over and over and over and over again. Like the game doesn't magically get worse with advancements in technology. And but from where I sit, like you used to like Pete's one of the handful of greatest players of all time, and you could go after his backhand, and if you had to be defensive or go after it or like you could serve to it, there was at least like a pressure release valve. My backhand stunk, right? Like there were places that you could go. There were places that you could go, and now it's like, where do you go with Medvedev? Where do you go with Novak? Like, what do you pick your poison? Where do you go with Sinner? Like,
Yeah.
there's nowhere to go comfortably, and everyone's 6'5" and can run.
Yeah, it's incredible how physical the game's gotten and how much better. And you're right, there aren't weaknesses very often anymore, and that's you're nitpicking when you're trying to find a weakness. You're really nitpicking, and it used to be. You're right. You used to be able to find weaknesses in players' games, and I also think it was highlighted a little bit by the change in surfaces. You were able to pick on Pete's backhand at the French Open because it was so much slower, and now the French Open, the U.S. Open, Wimbledon, the Australian Open are all not that different. So when you're the best player, I actually, to me, I'm a little nostalgic. I like the change in surface being
Me
pretty
too.
drastic because it would, to me, create for how are they going to adjust? How are they going to change their game? Are they going to completely? Is Pete going to stop serving volleying at the French Open? Is Carlos Moya going to start serving volleying at Wimbledon? And see what's going to happen. Now you don't need to do that as much. You're a lot of times if you're the best player in the world, you're the best player on all the surfaces. And so that's something that I do miss a little, and that's changed about our game. That changed even really in our era.
Yes.
Now it's changed even more, I think.
Yeah, I remember distinctly, and I like an 03 semi, I lost to, or 04 to 05 Wimbledon finals. 04, I think Roger served and volleyed 80% of the time, and it was like very different. And in 05, it was like he was just staying back and letting me punch myself out because it had slowed. Like there was a conscious decision. I think it was an overreaction to, in the 90s, all you heard was, okay, big service, we're just walking back and forth, and that's not entertaining. I feel like there was an overcorrection, and now it's just kind of been accepted practice. I wish there were some crazy fast weeks that were just known that like, and then you get to see a lot of guys like, why does serve and volley not exist? One, strings. People talk about rackets, but the entire thing is strings. It's why James Blake can swing as hard as he can on every return, and the bottom falls out of it, all of a sudden at the end. But I think there should be differences. We should be showcasing different styles, frankly.
Totally agree.
So I kind of fully agree with you.
At the end of the year, there used to be those like, what was it, Paris and
they're lightning.
Yeah, a couple of those used to be lightning, and now they're really slow again.
Yeah, they put down that kind of surface that you kind of rub your hands across it, not dissimilar to Indian Wells, and it kind of feels like sandpaper.
Yeah.
A little bit. But James, you're the man. Thank you for coming on.
Hold on. But before you let him go, we need to know about the
the picture.
Poster. I want to understand the.
Oh, that's right.
I want to understand the conversation you had with.
Can you tell me about this little? I forgot. You're like the guy in our whole setup right here, like right there. Look at that. So you're I just want to lay context. You're in a bathtub, pouring water on yourself shirtless.
So a few things. One, I would like to negotiate the fact that for this to be even get on air, that should now be taken down because that's ridiculous that you have that behind you. Second, I was really
hoping that. We'll do it. Don't let us interrupt. It'll get taken down. But just make sure everyone sees it first.
I was really hoping that no one knew that was me, even though all my friends saw it. And we're on a group text completely making fun of me saying, oh my God, if I had a podcast.
Oh no, that's me. My team just hosed me. Know that I would have taken it down. Did you do that?
Yes.
Was that his?
Producer Mike and I had a conversation about what we can replace it with.
Oh, you pricks.
That's what will now be on your podcast wall.
What the fuck is the point of having your own show if you just get drilled on your own show? Like this is supposed to be a home game.
Yeah,
go ahead.
One more thing, I did get paid for that one because that was an ad. That one behind you, I don't know. I think that was just like an editorial. That was just you wanted to take your shirt off, I think.
No, see, that's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong. I got paid. It was just 2 years later when my contract was up because of all of this stuff.
Playing the long game.
A plus B equals D sometimes. I'll tell you, that's a good prank. So those who are only listening on audio, I had this glorious picture that's in our back of our studio setup where James is in a bathtub, shirtless, pouring Evian on himself. And I said if he came on, we'll take it down. So he mentioned it. And when I took it down, apparently he had producer Mike, who's now fired. And now it's a shirtless picture of me from back in the day, which I have no shame about. I was skinny and had hair. Like this is a win. This is.
It'll be up on YouTube. So
I was skinny, but I didn't have hair in that bathtub. I was.
Yeah, you're still skinny. I say it every time I see you. You're one of those annoying guys who retires and gets thinner.
Well, I think I eat healthier now than I did when I was on tour. My wife is a great cook, and she keeps me very healthy. So I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's like another whole podcast about how your wife's just kind of better than you. But anyways, everyone check out. I know we will anyways. Obviously, tennis-centric crowd who's listening to this, but Miami Open by Itaú. Did I say it right?
Itaú, yes.
All right. The quali start this Sunday, March 17th. Check those out. Main draw, March 20th. Finals are the 30th and 31st at Hard Rock Stadium. James, love you, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.